There was a small, almost forgotten town nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains called Wren Hollow. A ghost town by all appearances, Wren Hollow had only one landmark that refused to crumble with time: St. Mercy's Church, a stone cathedral standing stubborn and untouched at the center of the decay. Nobody lived there anymore except for the whispers. At least that's what they said. I had always been skeptical of ghost stories, brushing them off as small-town myths meant to scare children. So when my friend Marcus dared me to spend the night inside the abandoned church and record everything for our YouTube exploration channel, I accepted without hesitation. We were thrill seekers, desperate for the kind of content that would blow up and make us famous. But fame often demands payment, and sometimes it collects that debt in blood. We arrived just before sunset. The road leading to Wren Hollow was overgrown, and half the time we drove through what felt like tunnels of gnarled branches and mist. My phone lost all signal about 10 miles out. That should have been my first warning. The church stood exactly as the pictures had shown online: a towering stone beast with jagged stained glass windows, a crooked steeple, and doors chained shut with rusted locks. An unsettling sense of being watched prickled the back of my neck as I stared up at it, but Marcus laughed and started looking for another way inside. We found a broken window near the back and slipped through easily, our flashlights slicing through the darkness inside. The air was damp and heavy, thick with the scent of mildew and something older, something sour and metallic. Blood, I thought absurdly. But I pushed the thought away and kept filming. The main hall was a cavernous stretch of pews leading up to a decaying altar. Behind the altar stood a massive crucifix, but the figure of Christ had long since been removed or stolen. Only rusted nails and streaks of something dark remained. It was colder near the altar, freezing almost. Our breath misted in front of us even though it was late summer outside. As we explored, the first whisper came. At first, it was so faint I thought it was the wind pushing through cracks in the stone. A long, low murmur, like 100 voices speaking beneath the threshold of hearing. I turned to Marcus, but he had gone ahead, disappearing through a side door leading into what I assumed was the rectory. "Marcus," I called, but my voice was swallowed by the heavy darkness. Then came the second whisper, closer this time. I caught it on camera, a shadow flitting across the far wall, too fast for a person to move naturally. The whispering grew louder. I shone my flashlight into every corner, but there was nothing there. Only peeling walls, broken furniture, and shattered stained glass throwing broken rainbows across the floor. My hands shook as I followed the direction Marcus had gone. The rectory was a maze of twisting corridors and tiny rotting rooms. I found Marcus standing rigidly in a small chapel, staring at something with wide, unblinking eyes. "Dude, what are you doing?" I whispered, stepping closer. That's when I saw it. A woman in a black veil stood behind the pulpit, her head bowed as if in prayer. Her hands were clasped tightly, the skin a pale, corpse-like blue. She murmured under her breath, the words foreign and rhythmic like an ancient prayer. Her veil fluttered slightly even though there was no wind. Marcus didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. His flashlight had fallen to the floor, the beam casting long, crooked shadows that danced across the chapel walls. My instincts screamed at me to run, but something deeper, colder, held me rooted to the spot. Then she looked up. There was no face beneath the veil, only blackness, endless and consuming. 2 pinpricks of red light glowed where her eyes should have been, burning with a hatred so pure it made my stomach twist. She lifted one trembling hand and pointed directly at me. The whispering became a roar, thousands of voices screaming in unison. Marcus let out a choked sound and dropped to his knees, clutching his head. I ran to him, grabbing his arm, trying to pull him up, but he was heavy, like something unseen was anchoring him to the ground. "Get up. We have to go," I shouted over the rising noise. The woman in black stepped forward, her movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet with its strings yanked by a cruel hand. I yanked Marcus harder, and finally, with a desperate gasp, he staggered to his feet. Together we stumbled out of the chapel, sprinting through the maze of hallways, the whispering chasing us like a physical force, slamming doors behind us and rattling the floorboards beneath our feet. We didn't stop until we reached the broken window. I shoved Marcus through it first, then scrambled after him. As I pulled myself out, I glanced back into the church one last time. The woman stood there at the window, inches away from me, her veil brushing the broken glass. A whisper slipped from her unseen lips, a single word this time, clear as a bell. "Stay." We didn't stop running until we reached the car. The engine groaned and sputtered but mercifully started on the third try. We tore down the mountain road, branches scratching at the sides of the car like grasping fingers. When we finally made it back to town, we reviewed the footage. Most of it was normal, just shots of us exploring. The whispers were faint, almost easy to dismiss. And when the woman in black appeared, the screen simply glitched. A few frames of static, then nothing. Marcus hasn't spoken a word since that night. He sits in his room, staring blankly at the wall, whispering under his breath in a language I don't recognize. Sometimes, when the night is quiet, I swear I can hear someone whispering at my window too. It started with a letter. A simple, yellowed envelope slipped under my apartment door late one evening, no stamp, no sender address. Only my name scrawled across the front in shaking, frantic handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper, and on it only a short sentence. Do not enter room 6E at the Hollow Pines Motel. At first I thought it was some prank. I had never heard of the Hollow Pines Motel. But curiosity, as it always does, dug its claws into me. I googled the place and found it easily enough. A crumbling, forgotten building on the edge of town, once a bustling stop for travelers before the new highway diverted traffic elsewhere. The next evening, against every shred of logic in my body, I drove out to the Hollow Pines Motel. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds, the neon sign flickering weakly in the humid night air. Only a few rooms were still occupied, judging by the sparse scattering of cars. The place smelled of mildew and rusted metal. At the front desk sat an old woman, hunched and nearly skeletal, staring blankly at a tiny television set behind the counter. When I asked for a room, she slid a key across the counter without a word. Room 6E. I hesitated. Surely she could see my fear, the way my hand trembled as I picked up the key. But she only turned her gaze back to the flickering TV, as if I had already ceased to exist. The walk to room 6E was surreal. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions, the cracked wallpaper peeling away like dead skin. Lights buzzed and flickered above me, throwing long shadows that danced across the dirty floor. The door to room 6E was different from the others. Newer. The wood polished, the brass number plate shiny and untouched by time. I stood there for a long time, the key heavy in my hand, my heart pounding against my ribs. That letter's warning screamed inside my mind. But, like an idiot, I inserted the key and turned the knob. The door swung open silently. Inside, the room was pristine. Spotless. The bed was neatly made with crisp white sheets. A single chair sat near the window, and a small nightstand rested beside the bed, holding a dusty lamp and an old rotary phone. Everything was unnaturally quiet. No hum of electricity. No creaking floorboards. Even my own breathing felt muffled, as if the very air was pressing down on me. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft click, though I didn't touch it. I should have left right then. I should have run. Instead, I sat down on the edge of the bed and waited. For what, I didn't know. Hours might have passed. Or maybe minutes. Time felt slippery, meaningless. And then the phone rang. A shrill, piercing sound that shattered the unnatural silence. I stared at it, my heart leaping into my throat. Every instinct screamed not to answer. But my hand moved on its own, lifting the receiver to my ear. Static. And beneath the static, a voice, low, almost a growl, whispering my name. I slammed the phone down and jumped to my feet. The walls around me seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with a life of their own. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping so sharply I could see my breath. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure standing in the corner of the room, near the window. It was almost featureless, a tall, shadowy outline barely distinguishable from the darkness around it. But I could feel it watching me, its gaze heavy and oppressive, like a weight crushing down on my chest. I backed away slowly, my hands groping for the door. But there was no doorknob on the inside. Only smooth, unbroken wood. The figure moved. Not walking, sliding as if gliding across the floor without touching it. It moved closer, closer, the space between us shrinking with terrifying slowness. I pounded on the door, screamed for help. But the walls swallowed my voice, muting it into a pathetic whisper. The figure reached out a hand, a long, thin arm ending in fingers far too long to be human. And when it touched my shoulder, the world went black. I woke up outside. Lying on the cracked asphalt of the parking lot, the early dawn light breaking over the horizon. My car was parked nearby, keys still in my pocket. The motel behind me stood silent, empty. Room 6E was gone. Where it had once been was now only a blank stretch of wall, no door, no window. Like it had never existed. When I tried to show people the video I had recorded on my phone that night, there was nothing. Just blackness. A 2-hour recording of empty, featureless darkness. But I wasn't alone anymore. Sometimes, when I am alone in my apartment late at night, I hear the phone ring. and I know if I answer it, I might find myself back in that silent room with no door to escape. They warned me not to take the old pine trail after sunset. The locals at the diner, leathery-skinned farmers and tired truckers, had exchanged uneasy glances when I asked for directions to Ravenwood Forest. Some had even muttered prayers under their breath. Only the waitress, a woman in her 60s with sharp gray eyes, had spoken aloud. "If you hear the singing," she said, "don't follow it." I thought it was just small-town superstition. Ghost stories passed down through bored generations. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I had come to Ravenwood to find my sister, Emily. 2 weeks ago she had set out to hike the old pine trail, a dense, overgrown path that hadn't been maintained in years, and had simply vanished. No signs. No tracks. The rescue teams had given up after a week. But I refused. Emily was stubborn, resourceful. She wouldn't give up. She wouldn't just disappear. So here I was, standing at the mouth of the old pine trail as the last light of day bled out of the sky. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birdsong, no rustle of animals. Just the soft creaking of ancient trees and the cold whisper of the wind through the pines. I should have turned back then. But stubbornness runs in the family. I pressed on. The path was barely visible, swallowed by roots and thick underbrush. The deeper I went, the heavier the air became, thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves. Shadows stretched and twisted around me, and my flashlight barely pierced the darkness ahead. An hour passed. Maybe 2. I called Emily's name again and again, but the only answer was the hollow echo of my own voice. Then, I heard it. Soft, lilting music, like a woman humming an old lullaby. It floated through the trees, sweet and sorrowful, tugging at something deep inside me. For a moment I thought it might be Emily. Maybe she was hurt, calling for help. Against every warning I followed the sound. The trail narrowed into a twisting path between gnarled trees, the branches arching overhead like skeletal hands. The humming grew louder, closer, yet somehow still distant, always just out of reach. And then I saw her. Standing in a small clearing bathed in pale moonlight, a woman in a white dress, her back to me, long hair cascading down her shoulders. She swayed gently, humming that haunting melody. "Emily?" I called, my voice trembling. She turned slowly. It wasn't Emily. Her face was wrong, blurred and shifting, features melting like wax under a flame. Her eyes were hollow pits of darkness, and from her mouth spilled not a song, but a chorus of whispering voices, all speaking at once in a language I couldn't understand. I stumbled back in horror, tripping over roots and crashing hard onto the ground. The woman, the thing, began gliding toward me, her feet never touching the ground. Her arms stretched out, impossibly long, fingers clawing at the air. I scrambled to my feet and ran. The forest twisted around me, the path disappearing no matter which way I turned. Trees shifted and closed in, roots rising to trip me, branches clawing at my clothes and skin. The humming grew louder, sharper, drilling into my skull. I ran blindly until my legs gave out. When I looked up, I found myself in another clearing. At its center stood an ancient, gnarled tree, blackened and twisted, its roots snaking out like veins across the earth. And hanging from the branches, bodies. Dozens of them, swinging gently in the night breeze. Men, women, even children, their faces frozen in expressions of terror and despair. Their eyes were gone, black holes staring into nothing. One of the bodies twisted as it swung, and I saw her. Emily. Her lifeless face staring down at me, blood trickling from the corners of her empty eye sockets. I screamed, the sound ripped raw from my throat. The humming swelled, deafening now. The white-dressed figure emerged from the shadows, her mouth opening impossibly wide, a black void that seemed to pull the very light from the world around it. I ran again, fueled by pure terror, crashing through the underbrush, branches tearing at my skin. Somehow, impossibly, I burst out of the forest and onto the cracked asphalt road near where I had parked. My car stood there, untouched, as if nothing had happened. I didn't stop to think. I threw myself inside, locked the doors, and tore down the road, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. But I hear the humming sometimes. Late at night, when the world is still, a soft, mournful lullaby drifting through the air. And sometimes, I catch a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a woman in a white dress standing just at the edge of the trees waiting. Always waiting.